So today's quote is, "To be looked upon as a fool by an idiot is a true connoisseur's delight." It's from a philosopher from 150 years ago. What do you think that means?
That if an idiot thinks you're an idiot, you're probably much smarter than them or different than them, so you're not like them.
Yeah, exactly. So if an idiot thinks you're an idiot, therefore it doesn't matter their opinion. And what it means is that we live in a world where everyone believe that they can evaluate other people. But the reality is there are situations where we let people who already know less than us evaluate us. And it's not the fault of the person who is evaluating, it's the fault of the person being evaluated to let that happen. So let that happen, it can happen, but let them have an impact on ourselves should not happen. And so this 25 years ago existed, but now in the world of social media, it's even more important, is we should not have any considerations for people who know nothing to have an impact on how we feel about what we're doing. We should be doing what we want to do, and we should have some perspective that what we do is right. Why why would this be important in business? Why would this be important in marketing? What do you do when you do business? What do you do when you do marketing? Is you try to do something different, something that is better. And so when you try to do something that is different and better, first you come up with what you believe is in innovation. And so if you have something, you're going to do something new that nobody ever done before, and you ask the opinion of a lot of people, it's very likely that you're going to get a lot of negative. And then if you get a lot of negative, what you do is you just stop. But then you should think about, I got negative and I got positive. Who gave me negative and who gave me positive? If the negative comes from a lot of idiots, that doesn't mean you should stop. Maybe the positive comes from the right people, the people that are going to be the customers. Who you trying to satisfy? Trying to satisfy everybody is not right. We should be trying to satisfy the people that are your part of your targets. You should not try to satisfy anyone. And also when you make something new, most of the time the consumers don't think it's a good idea. And should you listen to the consumers? Maybe not. So trying to do something different and better by asking the consumers what they think, by asking the non-consumers what they think, by asking bystanders what they think, is going to give you all kinds of responses. And these responses may have zero value depending on who is responding. And so that's why this is very important, because we all tend to listen to everyone. And sometimes we are being influenced by the wrong people who actually were sort of, whose opinion was not very worth anything. So in business, a lot of people procrastinate. A lot of people make bad decisions. And sometimes they say, I ended up making the wrong decision by listening to too many people. Have you ever heard that? A business person saying that, or a situation where someone said, my first instinct was the good one, and I did something by listening to people, and that was not the right thing. And I ended up somewhere where I'm very mediocre, and I should have done what I wanted versus listening to other people. Okay, so this happens, and this is a mistake. And so that's what this quote is about. To be looked upon as a fool by an idiot is a true connoisseur's delight. Is you let them speak, but you don't want to be arrogant and thinking that everybody is an idiot and only you is the smart person, because then that makes you someone also very dangerous in business by thinking you know it all. Know it all is bad. Know nothing is bad. Believing the experts are the only one that knows is bad. Believing the consumers are the only one that knows is bad. So which means that there's a lot of shades that you have to understand, and everything is sort of a balance, and therefore it's complicated. And it takes a lot of consideration in order to make your decisions. So where do you research? You're searching your environment. Your environment is made of the micro and macro environment. And the first thing that you draft is a SWOT analysis, where the hardest part is the external, and the hardest part of the externals are the opportunities. The opportunities is the brain, the blood, the heart that will make your business succeed. There's no successful businesses. This one you can say always. There's never always any business that is successful without being surfing some kind of opportunity. No opportunity, no business. Sometimes the opposite happens, where you have found an amazing opportunity and your business is not successful, because it's not just having an opportunity that will make your business successful, but it's for sure that you don't have an opportunity that your business will not be successful. There's got to be some opportunity. It's like there's no fire without flames. There's got to be a flame. But if there's a flame, that doesn't mean there's going to be a huge fire. There may be nothing. But you have to have this opportunity. So I invite you again. I received some draft this week. It was good because people now, I think, are making progress, and we may have probably close to 3 groups now that are sorted out. So I would say it's 2.8, and so it's good. We're getting there. Once you have your opportunity, then you're going to be cruising by just coming up with solution around this. Do you have any other questions or comments that you want to add? All right, so I will go therefore into finishing what is research. So research starts with looking for a problem, a question that you want to answer. Second is you looking to see if you have an existing resource to answer your question, and this is called exploratory phase, and it's called secondary data research. So you look for existing data, called secondary data. Then you think maybe the data that is secondary is old, maybe it's too old, maybe it's biased, maybe it's too biased, maybe it's different, too different. It's not exactly, it's like how much smoking people do, and the answer is about cigarettes, and maybe you are in the cigar business. Cigar, pipe, and cigarettes are 3 different types of smoking, and what applies to the cigarettes may not apply to the cigars. So then you decide that you have to collect the data yourself. Within the exploratory research phase, you're going to collect primary data first from qualitative research. So qualitative research is not collecting a lot of data from a lot of people, but it's collecting a lot of data from a few people. So it's many questions, and the questions evolve within the interview. So you don't have all your questions prepared, because there's going to be some that you will be coming up with as you're doing the interview, versus the questionnaire. You will have all the questions prepared, and you're going to have all the answers as much possible as prepared, because you want to limit the number of questions that are open-ended, because they are harder to interpret. And so therefore you have as many close-ended, as many quantitative, descriptive type of research, and that's the second phase. Why should you do qualitative research with primary research? Is because you want to try to understand the reason why people do things. You want to try to have some hypothesis. Then the hypothesis, the assumptions, will be quantified inside the descriptive research. So descriptive research is very focused on the reliability. So you need to worry about the probability sampling, who is being asked the questions, are they people that are representative of the population, how do we select them, were they conveniently selected, or were they randomly selected within the target group, within the population, and so forth. Are they a representativeness in the sample of the overall population, and so forth. So reliability is very important in descriptive research. Reliability is not important in the qualitative research. Another concept of quality research, beside reliability, is validity. Are we measuring the right thing? Which means we want to know, that the people who go the most on vacation are more likely to stay in a 5-star hotel than the people that go on least vacation and are actually staying in a hotel because of work, and they will use a lower quality hotel, something like this. So then you say, who should we ask? Well, you should ask people who travel, people who take vacation, people who work and travel and so forth. And so these will be valid people. If you ask retired people, then they won't be able to answer the question about the staying in a hotel for work because they're retired. So therefore, the research will not be valid. In addition, they won't be reliable because the people may be changing the answer because they don't really understand why you're asking them these questions. So the stability of the answer is an issue of reliability. The type of people you ask for the purpose of the research is an issue of validity. So validity is a concern for exploratory research and for descriptive research, but mostly for exploratory research. Versus reliability, it will be a concern for both, but again, it's easier to measure reliability than it is to measure validity because there's more conceptual issues with validity. Reliability and validity are complex subjects when you do research, and if asked questions about them inside the quiz, they will have to be simple. Simple, such as, do you worry about reliability in qualitative primary research? And the answer will be no, you don't worry about it because you can't measure it. So this, if you can't worry about something that you cannot do anything, and that's not the focus. Causal research is the third phase, and causal research has to do with lab experimentation. So it's also called experimental research. So what you try to do is measure cause and effect. So you have 3 groups, A, B, C, and you're going to try to see the quality of a commercial. And you're going to have one commercial based on what you know from the consumers that will have humor. It will have something funny in that commercial. Versus the other one is you're going to say, we want to get the attention, so we're going to use sex, like nudity or something, or some level of nudity. And then you're going to have, so you're going to show people several commercials of different brands, different products, and one of them is yours, to group A. And then you show the one with the nudity, let's say in group A, and the one with the humor in group B. And then the group C is you're going to show, you're not going to show your ad. And then you're going to give some questionnaires to the people before they see all these commercials. And after they see the commercials, and you're going to see if there's a variation of people perception of the brand. If there is a variation of people perception of the brand between the time before and after they see the commercials, is you would assume that this variation, let's say a positive variation, the more positive variation is related to the ads being more effective, being either the nudity or the humor. And so this experiment allows you, and so that would be something that you would do systematically for the Super Bowl, for example, because that would be so expensive that you would want to predict and anticipate people's reaction before the event. So that's for an ad. How would it work for a product? So a product, let's say a movie, you will do the same. Is you will have group A that would see the movie where the main actors die at the end. Group B is they would leave at the end in the scenario, and then group C, they won't see the movie, and so therefore, you would have no people have no opinion on the movie because they would not see it. It's by seeing something that they have an opinion, and it's the treatment of what they see that you will measure as being more effective or less effective. So again, causal research is also a quantitative method, so you couldn't do this for 50 people. You would have to do this for 100 to 300 people, and therefore it's a cost, not cost effective, it's expensive, it's time consuming, and you just don't do it just for fun. Is a business, a for-profit business, has limited resources and therefore wouldn't want to do this just to make sure that they avoid a big mistake. And you couldn't do for everything, so you would have to sort of select what you want to do it for. Do you have any question on those 3 phases? So those 3 phases are important to understand for yourself, for the quiz, for yourself. What I mean by for yourself, for doing business, because to do business, you do have to understand the involvement in doing research. In this class, should you do descriptive research? Descriptive research is like a survey, a questionnaire. Should you do that?
Yes.
So the answer is no. Don't do descriptive research. I strongly recommend that you don't do a survey. So let's see why. When you do exploratory research, you have to do descriptive research before you do exploratory. Which one do you do first? Descriptive or exploratory?
Probably exploratory.
Yes. So you do exploratory research first. To do descriptive, you have to do exploratory. To do descriptive, you have to do exploratory. So let me put it in very basic words, like student words. Student words is the less I do, the better I feel. So for example, how much research time do I want to spend? I want to spend 5 hours. If you have 5 hours to spend, what you're gonna do? You're gonna try to find all the information from Google. Let's say I simplify. That's like the first thing. So you do Google and you find all the information on Google. You do more. No. What is it that you did? You did exploratory research. You Google the term music streaming. And then you get all kinds of reports and it's more than you need. You do more. You don't do more. You don't go and do a survey if you've got so much information that you are like stuffed of information. You have enough information for 10 months to go through. So you don't do more. So doing exploratory research most of the time is way more than what you need. And in order to do a survey, you're gonna have to collect some information because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to say, how many men live in America? And then you do a survey. Nobody does a survey in my classes to find how many men live in Northridge. They just can find it from the census.gov.ca. Okay, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So students are that way, businesses are that way. If you find information, don't go further. So by doing exploratory research, by doing a Google search, maybe better, IBIS search, a merchant search, and so forth, you find all the information. You don't need to do anything else. And so it's not like I'm a nice professor, but I'm just telling you, you don't have to do the survey, because the survey would mean that you're doing all the exploratory research. Then you find the information in the exploratory research in order to create a survey. And then you do the survey to 1,000 people, and then you get the data. If I was demanding students to do this, they would say, this class may be good, I learned something, but it was so much work that I hated it. I had no other time than just working for this project. And what does the professor think? That's all we have to do. I have other things to do and so forth. So I'm just being honest with you. You have so many things to do that you don't want to do more than what you need to do. So if you can find the answer from Google, that's it. If you can't find it from Google, look for IBIS Word. If you can't find it from IBIS Word, look at mergent database or whatever. But if you can find it from this, you go to the next level, which is you ask a random person through an interview. That's still what needs to be done before you go to the survey. However, when I ask the students not to do a survey, because it comes down the road after having done all these things before, the students still want to do a survey because they think a survey is just thinking about questions and putting it in the questionnaire. But oftentimes, they find that they need 200, 300, 400 people, and they're asking questions that anyone can, questions which answers anyone can find in 2 minutes. So why would you spend 6 weeks working on something that you can find in 2 minutes? Nobody wants to do that. I'm just being honest. I've been doing this for a long time, and I know that's the mistake that 90%, if not more, of the students do, is they make it harder for themselves, thinking they're doing it better, and that's going to be a reinventing the wheel. No. Businesses, for the most part, how much research do they do? Most businesses. How much research do you think they do? Very little. Most businesses, how much do they understand between primary, secondary data, qualitative and quantitative research? How much do they understand of this? Very little. In fact, what's interesting is if I was to present that to 100 businesses, they would think I'm very intelligent or something, because it sounds very scientific and all that. When in fact, it's super basic. It's like, once you hear it, it's sort of common sense. It's look for the lowest hanging fruit. So if you do research, you do research because you want to minimize mistakes. So you don't do research because you have money and time to waste, because you want to make the best decision. So once the businesses agree with that, they just don't do it because it sounds good. They just have made so many mistakes, they don't want to do it again. So they do research by experience, having learned the hard way. When they do research is they look for the lowest hanging fruits. And so the longest hanging fruits are the published research, the one that's already available. However, when you look for the easiest research, the one that you find on Google for free in 20 seconds, what's the problem with that usually? And this is an easy question because you've been doing this for a month, just in my class, if not in other class before. What's the problem with that one? Finding information in 20 seconds on Google.
It might not be high quality data.
Maybe it's not, like Casey said, it's not high quality data. Maybe it's old. Maybe it's so vague and broad that it helps me, but everybody else. So therefore it's so unspecific that it's sort of random and generic, that if you're a business, you couldn't take an opportunity of some data that's so generic that you can make a revolution out of this. You have to find something new. If it's new and better, how can you find something that is new and better in 20 seconds? So I'm not saying it has never happened in the past 5,000 years that someone didn't come up with an amazing idea thinking about the subject for 20 seconds. I'm not saying it never happened, but I'm saying it's very rare. Maybe less than 1% of the time, maybe less than 0.0001% of the time. So therefore, what it means, and mostly now when you live in a 7 billion people Earth, is you have to dig a little deeper in order to find good things. But you don't want to think that the deeper you dig, the better the information. It's not exactly like this. It's just that very few amazing things that are at the surface, but that doesn't mean that all the good stuff are. The deeper you can go, the more you're going to find them. That's also true. So it's this balance between both, which means, so what's deeper? Well, one, do secondary data analysis. Can you find all the opportunities from there and be scot-free and rock and roll? No, usually not. My rule of thumb is telling me that usually meaning 95% of the time, you have to go beyond that. 5%, maybe you get lucky, but 95%, you have to go beyond that. So what's next? Hook to some people, do some interviews, some qualitative research. How many people should we talk? I don't know, 3 people, better than nothing. And at that time, you keep digging a little deeper. Usually what happens is when you talk to 3 people, they tell you something that is good or bad, maybe some good, that makes you go back to Google and IBIS World and all this to look for some information. So that's what you do for a while. You go back and forth, look for information, talk to some people, get some ideas, go back to look for information, and you go back and forth and back and forth. Some people do this for a month. Some groups do that for 2 months, right? But rarely it's required after you've done this back and forth for 2 months. The solution after that is doing a survey to 500 people. It's very rare. Can it happen? It can happen. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's very rare. However, if I was able to go into the brain of most people, most students, they will think that good opportunities are found in surveys given to 500 people. That's how you find a good opportunity. When in fact, not that much. What do the survey do then, since so many people do it? First, there's a lot of people that do it because they think that's the solution. And it's kind of crazy. It's, you know, I mean, that's just the way it is. A lot of people do the wrong thing thinking is right. And they don't get much. And they keep doing it, hoping for a better day. But why do people do it? Is when they want to identify the frequency or when they want to pinpoint a specific group of people. So suddenly you say, you know, what's the right size of a hot dog? So then you speak to 3, 5, 10 people, and you find the right size from a hot dog is 8-inch. Well, is that reliable? No, because 8-inch, that's based on 8 people. So then now you need to identify what's the right size by asking 500 people. But the 500 is not even what's interesting, is within this 500, what did the men say? What did the old woman say? Well, what did the rich African American say? And all of this. It's specifically, what did a specific group said about this? Because then you can think about a commercial, you can think about an ad, you can think about a picture in social media, a video on Instagram or whatever. They will be specifically made with that group of people, with that subject, and that's whatever size that they think is important. So it has to be targeted. So understanding the consumer, the deeper you understand the consumer, the better off you are, because you can better anticipate. So I hope I didn't come across as bad. I'm not making fun of the fact too many people do surveys. I'm trying to break the myth that good business is good marketing and good marketing is good research and good research is a survey. You know, like this. That's the rational, but it's not the rational. So now I feel like saying. Also, I don't want you to think that the richer your business, the more you go into causal research, or the bigger your business, the more you go into causal research. I mean, there's some connection. The smaller the business, the less likely you go into from the exploratory, descriptive, and causal. The smaller the business, it's possible that you stick to exploratory. The beauty with exploratory is it's also much faster. And another thing is when you want to detect a trend, you want to detect a trend before everyone, or you want to detect a trend where everybody is already working on the trend? And a survey, when you get to a survey, it means that you've done already the exploratory research. It takes time to do the exploratory and the survey. It could be 2 months, 3 months after. If you identify an opportunity, you want to be at the very beginning, because it's easier to pursue an opportunity at the beginning than when you start getting competitors. So that's another reason why exploratory research is great, because it's the fastest one, but it's the least reliable. So it's a trade-off: faster, more emotional research, deep psychological, the why, but not reliable, or much more reliable by going through the exploratory and then the descriptive, because you have to do the exploratory to do the descriptive, and you have more reliability, but at the same time you may have had 2 or 3 months that go by, and once they're gone, you can never go back to that, and other competitors working on it. So it's a trade-off. Hopefully I explain it in a way that you understand and realize that it may have been more important and interesting subjects that you thought originally. I know most of you are in marketing and so forth, so that's very, very important. If you're in marketing, you're in marketing research, and if you're in marketing research, you need to see those 3 levels in order to know that the survey is the last thing you want to do, because that means that you were not able to get the answers with the exploratory. But sometime again, as I said, you want the frequency, and the matter of the reliability is an important matter. So therefore, you will focus on getting that. So now we're going to talk about consumer behavior. And when we talk about consumer behavior, we connect this directly to FTP. So it's like segmentation, targeting, and positioning is probably you know, the most important function within marketing, because it's a function about deciding who's the customer and who should be the customer. So it's like, who is the customer, and at the same time, who should be the customer, and what do we do for them? But before we talk about who should be the customer, is we have to define who is the customer, what are the customers, and how do they think? What are the different steps that they are using in order to think? The number one element to predict customers, if there was only one element to predict customers, what is the single element that predicts the customers, do you think? How can you predict someone's behavior? It's by knowing them. What is it that you think that you need to know? You need to know their personality, you need to know their social class, you need to know their age, you need to know their income, you need to know their religion. What is it that you think you need to know if there was only one that would have the biggest impact? Yes, Melissa.
Psychological.
Why psychological?
The demographic information is proven to be less, effective, I guess, at predicting behavior than psychological.
And what is the psychological element that you think has the biggest impact?
Probably beliefs and attitudes.
So yes, beliefs and attitudes is very important. Absolutely. So let me explain psychological. So here there's 4 family of factors, and psychological is the one on the right side. So the first one is motivation. So there's people that are more or less motivated based on how much they see the importance of what's being offered. So for example, there's information on tires, and you own one car and you changed your tires a year ago. Motivation is going to be low because you have one car, you're not into cars, and you change your tires because your standard usual mechanic that does the routine service change your tires. You didn't even really ask for the choices, you just let them make the decision. The price was not too expensive, you wanted the cheapest one. So motivation is low. Now you are the one owner of DHL and you have 350 trucks. The motivation is going to be greater because it's a business, because it's a large expense, because it's going to have an impact on your business from many different perspectives, from liability to expense, long-term expense and maintenance and all this. So motivation is a psychological component that has an impact on how you're going to be behaving and predicting your behavior, depending, again, if you're for-profit, non-for-profit, commercial, private, residential, whatever the position that you have. The idea behind motivation is that you want to create points of motivation by creating problems. So what you do is you talk about, I don't know, you sell water, and you're going to talk about the amount of calcium that you have. And you're going to say, oh, our water has more calcium. Then someone else comes and say, our water has the best minerals, and we have a good balance of minerals, and we have a neutral pH and all this. And someone else comes, our water is the best because it's very has a flavor that makes it very delicious. Someone else comes, our water is the best because it comes from an area that has a lot of rare historical elements, and it's the water that people drank 200 years ago, or maybe it's religious. There was a saint that used to drink this water, or there was someone famous that was drinking this water, and so there's mythological value, whatever. So you create all of these not because you just want to be creative, is you create all of this because you anticipate the impact that those stories will have on people. And so you want to know the people, you want to know the impact before you do it to create this motivation. And sometimes what you do is you have 2 components. You're going to tell them it's the best water because it's flavor and the history. It's flavor and the quality of the minerals. because you know that one of your competitor is very good at the quality of their minerals or their flavor. So you borrow the main dimension, advantage and strengths of one of your competitors, and then add another one, which is going to create a point of differentiation. So constantly doing this in order to create people to go from a situation of satisfaction to a situation of dissatisfaction. And the more you try to dissatisfy them with what they have, the more they're going to try to get the satisfaction from what you have to offer. So it's a threshold and it's a point of difference that creates motivation. Or it's you're missing something. You have a puncture tire, now you have a motivation to get a tire. The second one is perception. Perception is I buy with my eyes. So I believe this packet of chips is better. Why? Well, because I like the packaging design, the picture on it. Because I like the claim. The claim, it has vitamin D, it has low sodium. I like the claim. Another one may be because you feel that this packet of chips is bigger. I mean, most packets of chips, when you open them, you find that half of the bag is empty. Being new, a new bag of packet of chips, half of it is empty. And the reason is they try to make the bag look big. So they know that the perception is very important and people buy with what they smell or see or feel. And so it's a perception based, and it's trying for people to make them feel that they're getting more than what they're paying for. That's very important. Learning is the fact that people buy what they remember, what they know something about. So you want to get into people's brain space. You want to be memorized. You want them to remember your brand. You want them to remember your story and your positioning. And therefore, that's brain share eventually will turn into market share and will turn into higher revenue. And so learning is very important and is very much based on conditioning, but also repeating. So conditioning is you make associations between things. So maybe it's an association to a special word. So you're going to keep saying, you know, this brand is reliable, this brand is reliable, this brand is reliable. And after a while, people will think, you know, Crystal Geyser is tasty. It doesn't have to be tasty. It has to be repeated, repeated enough to the point that people think that it's tasty, and they don't even remember it. They think that's not because it's tasty, but because they've heard it so much that their brain is actually telling them internally that if that's what they're memorized, it must be true. They don't want cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when what they feel is different from what they believe, and therefore they want a balance between what they have in memory, the information they have, and the way they behave. So that's the learning, very important. And then, like Melissa mentioned, the belief and attitudes is very important too, because it's connected to the learning. But eventually, the belief is the outcome of learning, which means that people, having memorized enough, they take the information that they heard enough that they believe this to be true. They believe this to be the truth, and it's a truth that has some level of anchor that is very hard to change, because it can even be irrational. It doesn't have to be rationally understood. It just has to be something that eventually they think is always been that way, and everyone thinks that way, therefore it must be true. Attitudes is again connected to the information. The information may be, you know, so they buy food, being able to repeat the nutritional value that they've heard in the messages. Eventually, they subject themselves and memorize themselves that this is to be true, and eventually they think it's healthy, and they don't look at it rationally. They just think it to be true because that's what they believe. And that's what's interesting, is the brain is actually very lazy most of the time, and the brain only remembers very simple things, basic things, and then use this basic knowledge to make decisions to simplify it. So we try to constantly simplify the process of making decision by going the shortest route as possible to save effort. And so those attitudes and beliefs are what we're using, you know. So it's like, if I buy, the more meat I buy, the better I'm going to be at swimming. And eventually, if that's what you keep hearing, eventually you will be conditioned to believe it's true, and you're going to be buying more meat and not question it until maybe there's a new belief suddenly with a new source, where the source is generating some kind of cognitive dissonance, and then you look into it and then you find maybe there's some other belief and you change. But so that's what we want as marketer, is to manipulate information in a way that helps people make quick decisions without thinking as much as possible, based on imperfect memory of information, because they don't remember the information perfectly. They remember the information in the most imperfect way. It's like the concept of zero emission. People remember zero pollution, but zero emission, zero pollution is not the same thing. But when you tell them zero emission, it's because you want to manipulate the fact that they will remember zero pollution. So psychological is very important, but in fact, it's strangely not the most important, because the most important is cultural. Why is cultural the most important? Because cultural is sort of the stereotype, the program that we receive. It's like a set of tools which are different norms and values that we receive from the specific society. And from these norms and values, we develop some affinity and some comfort. And this comfort is what we use as the guide in order to make decisions. So, you know, like, for example, a simple example is, because of my culture, I don't eat spicy. So then if someone says spicy strawberry, I will not want it. Spicy potatoes, I will not want it. Spicy something. But there may be some other culture that wouldn't want to eat strawberry because they say it's not in their culture. But if I said spicy strawberry, they'll go, oh, spicy, I'll try it. I don't know what strawberry is, but I'll try it. So the cultural aspect is the one that dominates. In fact, you can see within culture what you have. The most common thing about culture are the nationality, maybe your language, your race, your religion. All of this is part of your culture. And so people don't choose their race, and most people don't choose their religion. I'm not saying that nobody does, but it's pretty rare. And most people who are religious are not religious by choice, but by by connection to the region of their parents or the region of the area where they were. And obviously, most of these people who are religious believe in this religion to be the best one, even though they only know one religion. And so that's religion and the doctrine of that religion make them very much predictable, because you can guess what they're going to buy and what they're not going to buy based on the values of that religion, or maybe that culture from a national perspective. But the culture is the most prominent because the culture is like a code. There's all the codes already predetermined, not by you, not by your psychology, not by your age, but it's predicted by the values of your culture. But what's interesting also is the impact of the subculture. So the subculture maybe you like a specific music and you're a fan of EDM music or rap or something like this. Maybe you're a fan of a specific sport. And when I say a fan, it's goes to the concept of lifestyle very much, where your life and who you are can be very much explained by the cultural values of that sport. It's not something you do once a year. It's something that you do several times a week. And it has an impact on what you eat, where your money goes, the location where you live, what you do on the weekend, what you follow, and all of this is very much impacted by this. So it has to be a subculture which is not superficial, but it's deep. Your social class has an impact as well as the society in general as of your reference group. So the students may have a lot of things in common, as much as let's say the lawyers may have things in common, as much as the surgeons may have things in common. Is this reference group has a big impact because your peers influence you and you influence your peers and so forth. So there's some kind of motion of influence among people from the same group. But again, the biggest one is your culture, and the second one, biggest one, is oftentimes your family, which your family is also the sort of the recipient of the codes of your culture, and that's sort of why this is very connected. But then the roles that you have, maybe you're married, not married, and maybe you play being a mother, or maybe you're the CEO of some organization or whatever. So those roles and status have an impact. And then finally is the personal elements. So the personal elements is your age. So there's a cohort effect and a generation effect. The fact that you're married and not married has an impact with children as well. I mean, there's a tremendous difference between people when they get married and not married based on their change of expectations. And again, also a very important factor within personal is your income and your economic situation. I mean, if you have savings, how much savings you have has an impact on how you will consume. I mean, it goes with what can you afford, not afford, and so forth. And that has an impact on lifestyle, but it's not always connected. There's people that would make trade-off. Let's say maybe they're going to eat one McDonald's every day so they can have a Leica photographic camera. Leica like $5,000 or more for a camera, a photo camera, and maybe that's all they're going to spend this year is into their photographic equipment, and everything else is going to be very much less. So Leica should not say their camera are only for millionaires. They are for people that are fanatic about photography, because you may have a lot of millionaires that don't buy a Leica because they are not that crazy about spending that kind of money inside photographic equipment. So income is not everything. It can be compensated by lifestyle. And then there's the final element I haven't discussed, which is the personality. So we would think that our behavior, the explanation of our actions is explained by who we are. And you would imagine that the who we are is based on each one individual personality. It is, but it's much less than we think. Again, where you're born and where you live has a much greater impact than who you are. So the who you are is measured by what's called the traits, the personality traits. One personality trait is liking new things versus liking old things. Another personality trait is liking things made in America versus things made overseas. There's people that will buy something because it's made overseas, and by definition, you think it's better. And there's other personality that would think that if it's not made in America, it's not as good. So that's called a personality ethnocentrism, and that has an impact on how people behave. There's people also that look for variety. So the trait of variety seeking is people that would not go on vacation to the same place, for example. They would systematically go on a different destination because that would be the only interest that they have in traveling, is discovering new things. So personal factors are oftentimes believed much bigger, when in fact the biggest factors to explain people behavior is normally number one, and it's not 100% of the time, but let's say the majority of the time, is cultural elements. Number two, psychological. Number three, and I'm not sure what number three, because there could be so many different situations, but I'm only sure about the number one and the number two. So thank you for answering this question, Melissa. Hopefully you learned something, and maybe you can put it back in the context of all the different explanations. But you were mostly correct when you talked about the psychological elements, which is very important, but not as much as the culture, strangely. So the next element I want to talk about is actually an element that has to do with psychological. So the JND is a just noticeable difference. It's the minimum necessary change to be perceived. So every time you make a new product, you need to have enough changes, because if you don't have enough changes, people may think that there's no need to buy the product. I mean, some people didn't buy the iPhone 14 because they had the iPhone 13, and they don't see a benefit in buying the next generation because whatever are the changes are not sufficient for them to change. So it means that these people didn't have enough J&D. Should you have J&D for everyone? Is there such a thing as a universal J&D? No. So what is the most important J&D? The J&D of your specific target. So if your target doesn't see any J&D, means that you miss bringing enough innovations. Why is the J&D important? Because satisfaction is directly connected to the J&D. So you need to have enough differences for people to perceive a benefit, for them to measure the benefit, and for them to experience the benefit and say they're satisfied. If they experience J&D every time, they are more likely to trust you for the next generation and want to try the new product in hope to get again the same noticeable difference that confirm that they were making the right decision buying this new product. So it's sort of easy to understand, but it's not that easy to put in practice, because the more J&D, the more the product's going to end up being expensive. So every time you make an innovation, why don't you throw as much changes as possible? If you throw many changes, it's going to cost a lot of money. And if you throw many changes, too many changes, you're going to have to create even more changes for the next generation. So what you try to do is to have enough changes that you keep some to infuse in the next generation, but you also don't want to miss the opportunity to include enough so you stay competitive. So there's an issue of generation to generation of product that you're making, but an issue to be competitive against your competitor. So it's like a poker game where you want to have more innovations than your competitors. So the J&D is superior to your competitors, and the J&D is superior to your previous product. But if you focus just on your previous product, you may be under your competitors. And then if you beat your competitors, it's not always bad. If you have a J&D that is over-satisfying, it's not always bad, because sometimes you need to over-satisfy when you were perceived as not great. Then maybe the next time you want to perceive as being even better than what they would expect. Or maybe because you are making mistakes and you want to change this reputation of having been a brand that failed by becoming a brand that excelled. So having too high of a J&D is not what I recommend, but it may be an objective and a strategy in order to compensate for something, or to maybe improve your brand, because maybe you're going to increase the prices and you want to still keep your market share or something. Because if you increase your prices, you lose your market share. But if you increase your prices and you increase the quality, you may be keeping your market share. So the J&D is very important. The J&D is very connected to the concept of satisfaction. But as you will see, the J&D is also directly supported by the concept of segmentation, targeting, and positioning. In fact, your J&D is sort of infused inside the concept of positioning. There's like a common DNA between your positioning and your J&D. Now, what are any questions on the J&D in case? Okay, so the buyer decision process, this one is a simple, the J&D is, you want to learn about it because I'll have at least one question in the quiz. But the J&D you also want to learn, it's because it's sort of a critical marketing concept. I would say it's one of the 10 most important marketing concepts. So you're going to graduate with a marketing major. You want to be sort of interested, sort of in love with the concept of J&D. And then there's so many things that I have to explain that you may just have to hear once in your life, so that way you can move on. And so the buyer decision process is something that you may hear, study for the quiz, and then forget. But at the end, it's also pretty simple. And it says that there's a first stage. the consumer is in, which is the stage where they recognize that they have a problem. You know, they, I don't know, maybe they gain weight. And so they want to lose weight. And now they're looking for products that are on diet. So the need recognition is how much weight do I want to lose? You know, why do I want to lose weight? How do I want to lose weight? What are the methods? And you just look for some solutions. So you look for some solutions usually internally. So you use your beliefs, your attitudes, your memory in order to make an internal search decision. But oftentimes, if it's very involving, you may not have enough information, or maybe you have no information, and therefore you look for external source of information. And there's many kinds. There's the opinion leaders, influencers. There is the common men. There is the experts. There is the different media that would have different weight. There's the free information versus the one that you pay, and all of these have different influences on how you're going to feel about the information being more reliable or less reliable. Then you go through this information, and maybe more, maybe less, and you decide to buy the product, or maybe you decide before you buy to test this service or test this product before you make the decision to buy. Once you bought the product, without realizing it, so when you do the purchase decision, you look at the value. The value is how much do I spend and what are the benefits do I get? So value is measured during the time of purchase versus satisfaction is what's measured after the time of purchase by using the product and sort of guessing, measuring to see if the product is as good as what was promised or offered or proposed by the information on the product or information communicated on the product, right? So the satisfaction is measured by, does it meet my expectation? If it does, you're satisfied. If it's not, you're dissatisfied. And that has an impact on rebuying, and it has an impact on communicating about the product. So the value decision process is very rational, and there are all of these steps plus the one that I inserted in between in order to create this funnel of step-by-step how the consumer consume. Sometimes it goes very fast. They recognize the problem and they buy the product. Why? Because they have enough information, number one. Two is because they've done this before and they do the same thing. Three is because it's low involvement, it's not very expensive, and they're just gonna do the same as they did before. Four is because someone told them what to do, so they just did as they were told. So there could be much shorter versions, there could be much longer version. As I said, there may be a trial, and there may be multiple trial and assessment after the trial, before the trial, and all this. And as we will discuss, is if you're a business, this becomes more complex. The decision process for a business is much longer, much more strict and official and formal. There's a level of formality which is much higher for the businesses. Now, this adopter group concept is very important, and oftentimes the students misunderstanding how important it is. They think it's just a statistical thing where you say 34% is the early majority and 34% is the late majority. The percentage here are the stereotype across America for all the products. The reality, if you're looking at perfume, or if you're looking at buying cell phone, it's not the same. There will be different numbers for different industries, for different region in America, and so forth. So these are just the ballpark rule of thumb number. But what's very important is to see the innovators is the first, and the innovators is a very small percentage. So trying to make a business that only sells to the innovators is not a good idea. What you're trying to do is to have a business that not only sells to the innovators, but sells to the other groups. So that's what's very tricky. So you need, the innovators are the people that really know about this product and really are engaged and interested. And they will become the influencers that will influence the larger population. So you have to have a product that's just amazing, that is very special for the influencers to want to buy it. But then the influencers is going to create the momentum for the rest of the population to buy it. So the most important is not to have the best product, because it may be too expert based, and to have a product that is too basic, because it's going to be too majority based and the experts, influencers are never going to buy it. So it has to have these two sections. So it has to be innovative enough so the experts grab it, and then it becomes more standard for the rest of the population to have it. So when you sell a product, depending on your means as well, if you are a Nestle, it's possible that you don't spend much effort trying to sell it to the innovators and experts. Is you right away mass distribute advertising it to the point that the early adopters is very short, and it's the first really the group that goes and buys it. This adopter group category is the one that will be used by most businesses. Most businesses that don't have hundreds of millions of dollars of communication budget, which means that they're going to have to cultivate a small group that becomes the seed that influence in a spillover process to the rest of the group. That's the most cost effective. That's the one that takes maybe more time, but it's the one that is more realistic for most businesses, because you can't afford to do a mass, huge campaign, and therefore you have to go for those innovators. So what's the question? The question is, who are the innovators? In fact, most of the time, it's easier to identify the majority, your target, as the core target. But sometimes it's more difficult to identify the innovators within the target, who will be the people that will be the first one to adopt the product, and then sort of almost like a epidemic will carry the virus to the next group. Any questions on the adopter groups? So the adopter group is a concept that has to be used by the 4 groups in the consulting class. However, the more you deal with a product that will be sold to the masses, the more you have to think about the influence of the innovators. And in our cases, our 4 clients are not huge corporations, and therefore they're going to need to develop an innovator, influencer towards the larger groups in order to be effective financially, in order to communicate what they do. Obviously, the music group seems to be the one with the clients within the music industry, seem to be the one that are going to be most definitely be interested in looking at those innovators and influencers. But and that's going to be a discussion very soon, is who is it that you target that will be the first group to carry the weight to the larger groups. What we're talking about is targets. What are targets? Target is who you're going to sell the product at the end. It's not everyone, it's just a specific group that you're interested to satisfy. Positioning is the meaning that that brand is going to have for the target, and in contrast and comparison to the meaning that your competitors have for their brand. So positioning is not only worrying about 3 things. Positioning worries about what do the consumer want to hear and what they want your meaning to be. They worry about what are the current existing meaning for the brands of your competitors. And 3 is what are the meanings that we can have. Because it's one thing to want to try to have the meaning that your competitors have and have not, and the meaning that your consumers want you to have, but you also have to be honest, and you can't be a meaning that your competitors want, but it doesn't make any sense for you. So therefore, it has to be a balance between these 3 things: the competitors, the consumers, and what makes sense for you to have. You can't invent yourself being not something that you are. Now, what's interesting about STP is the follow-up concept for consumer behavior. Consumer behavior doesn't do much. Consumer behavior is just a knowledge, but the application of this knowledge is STP. STP, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the most important concepts because it talks about who is your customers and what you're going to tell them. What I missed talking here is the last one, which is segmentation, which is in fact the first one that you start working on. Segmentation is dividing the market in homogeneous groups. But you don't just divide for the sake of dividing, is you have to identify what are the characteristics that I should use for dividing. So if I was to teach this class, I would say, fine. So I'm going to try to teach better. To teach better this class, the best way to teach this class would be to teach one-on-one. Instead of teaching 24 students at once, I should teach one student one by one. However, we don't have the resources to do a one by one, so we try to have 25, and probably the administration wish it was 60 people at once. But if they do this, then it's totally different class and it would not be the same. So they try to reduce it to less than 25. And so if I have 25 and I want to make it better, how could I break the students down? Well, I could say the marketing major versus the other major. Or I could say the GPA above 3.5, the GPA 3 to 3.5, and the GPA under 3. Then I could say I teach the women on one side, the men on the other side. Then I could teach the younger students and the older students, under 30, above 30. So all of these are characteristics that I think we all agree separates the students with different characteristics. I could even say the height, people over 6 feet and people under 6 feet. And I could teach. However, the problem with the segmentation, are these correct segmentation characteristics? Are they acceptable? Well, not the word. Are they real? Are they characteristic of segmentation? They are. No, are they good? And the word in marketing is called salient, which means that they make sense. They are important and they make sense for the purpose of what we're trying to do, which is, let's say, break the students into 3 groups or 2 groups of groups that are homogeneous, that I could teach to them in a certain way, that I improve the teaching because of the saliency between, the connections and the importance of their characteristics, the homogeneity of the group. So the message can be more tailored for each group. Well, some are and some are not. I don't think the size of the students have an impact on how they learn the material that I teach. I don't think the gender has an impact. I think the GPA probably has an impact. I think maybe the interest in the subject and the fact that they see themselves working in marketing or having their own business has an impact. I'd say maybe the fact that they want to become consultant or not has an impact. So there will be some of these elements that have an impact and some that don't. What I do is these segmentation characteristics, I can combine them. So I could combine GPA and interest in being a consultant, or then GPA and wanting to be an entrepreneur, and then GPA and interest in the subject of marketing. Or then I could do interest of subject in marketing and do they want to become an entrepreneur? So what are the characteristics and what is the best combination? The more I combine characteristics, the smaller the group. The smaller the group, probably the higher the satisfaction, but then the more expensive will be to teach smaller and smaller groups. The most expensive is teaching one-on-one. The least expensive is teaching 200 on one professor 200. So you'll have to find what's the right balance for the purpose of keeping a certain level of quality teaching. And so in business, it's the same. It's like, what are the combination of their customers? The more I have combination, the smaller the market, and then you become micro-segmented. Then you become a niche company. That becomes your strategy. So sometimes you don't want to be a niche. Sometimes you want to be combinations. Okay, so it has to be always STP. You break people down, that's segmentation. You group people, that's targeting, and then you create a meaning for the people that you've grouped. Market targeting, you end up with how many segments? 12 segments. The age, the gender, the height, the GPA, the zip code, of people live. And then this gets a combination. Then I get 2 targets. One target with 2 characteristics and one target with 5 characteristics. And then positioning, I would have to have two positioning, one for each target, or maybe I could have one positioning that works for both targets, which means the meaning of the brand compared to what they want, the benefits of this product. Now, segmentation, again, you know, I just said your zip codes, that's your geographic, your age, your gender, your income, your interests, and then the benefits. It's like, why did you buy this? Well, I bought it because I wanted to prevent decay of my teeth. No, I bought it because I wanted to have good breath. No, I bought this because I want white teeth. So then you make a toothpaste that actually is good for white teeth, good for breath, good for decay. But you, on one of the toothpaste packaging, you put decay, on the other one you could put good breath, and then you have three targets with three products that seems to be totally different. So you can have three messages. Maybe you sell it in three different stores, or maybe you have more of that one in one store and more of that one in the other store. But at the end, it could be the same product, but you just want to work on perceptions where people recognize the benefits, and that's what makes them buy the product. So here, when I talk about market segmentation, those elements are the elements that are discussed in consumer behavior, because that's how you explain the different behavior. But that's used directly for doing segmentation. So segmentation is successful when you can give a number of how many people of an income over 100 and under 100, so it's measurable. Accessible, which means that they are not scattered and difficult to sell the product. They sort of you can plot them on a map, and it's not like there's a small group all over the place. Is there specific large groups that are big enough that you could be accessing them? Substantial means that the more you add segment characteristics, the smaller the target, and the smaller the target, the more work is going to be to focus on that small target, and it becomes macro segmentation, and that's a problem. Differential is the combination of characteristics that makes that target is going to be creating groups that are very different, and therefore they are not just theoretically different, but the reality is the difference is so small that it doesn't make much difference. Is you want to make sure that you are dividing people, and those divisions are more and more salient, which means more and more contrasting. Actionable is once you make those groups and you make a product for those groups, they do recognize that this product is made for them, and they do respond by buying the product. Now, when you look at targeting, so that was segmentation. When you look at targeting, you have three methods of targeting, and I'll make a break after this. The first one is you target everyone, and this is called undifferentiated. So you make a product, but it's not for older, more educated, less wealthy, more wealthy, more West Coast, more East Coast. It's for everyone in America. And you don't see any differences between the consumers that you would want to create different groups with different products. So that's undifferentiated. Concentrated is when you make a product which is recognizing that there's several targets, but yet those targets, you isolate them, but at the same time, you don't make specific products for each target. So in that situation, you don't want to say that concentrated is you have 15 targets, because that would look like undifferentiated, because that would be sort of making a product for all the targets, that's undifferentiated. Making the product for just one target, very specific, you know, it's just for women who lives in Southern California and who are from 19 to 20 years old and have no education. So that's a specific target, and that's called differentiated. But if you see that there's three groups of women and maybe one group of men that could be added, and therefore you end up with 4 different targets, and there would be one product for 4 different targets. And because there's not too much difference between these different women and that specific group of men, that would be concentrated. So the advantage here is to think about what's the most efficient. So obviously, if you focus on everyone with one product, that's the most efficient, but it's becoming unrealistic to think that in today's competitive market that we have, there's still a lot of room for undifferentiated. Unfortunately, that's sort of disappeared, like to a point that it's 0.001% left of businesses where you can be undifferentiated. 99.99999%, you have to be either concentrated or differentiated. So what would be the difference? Well, the difference is if you are very differentiated, it allows you to have a very specific product to a specific group of customers, which is something that you can do if you're a small business. But at the same time, if you're a large business and you have lots of resources and you want to be ultra competitive by having very specific products for specific customers. But the reality is most of the businesses that are concentrated are large businesses, is they don't try to be very special for a specific group, is they try to have something special for several large groups combined together. So therefore, I would recommend as a small business, most of the time, more than 80% of the time, to be differentiated and 20% of the time concentrated. But if you're a large business with several thousand employees, you know, and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, you may want to consider this time again as a ballpark, 80% of the time to be concentrated and 20% of the time to be differentiated, or maybe in that situation, if you're a really, really large business, you may even have some small opportunities to be undifferentiated. And that's very much the way to look at it is the resources, the return, the investment. Investing in having one product from specific group is very expensive and it's sort of risky. Having one product for multiple groups is less risky, but it makes you less special, less differentiated, and therefore more likely to be a big famous brand in order to have this opportunity to be less differentiated. If you're not a famous big brand, that's when you need to come out as being something very different, and therefore your specialty is what's going to make you more desirable because you're not just a random standard product, but more specific. Do you have any question on so far on segmenting? So this is information that for the most part you should already know. So hopefully I'm just sort of calibrating all of this in a way that maybe repeats what you already know, or maybe helps you enhance your current knowledge and maybe puts things in different perspective that makes you realize how all this could be formulated. Hopefully you also see the interest of discussing this for the sake of you presenting your segmentation, targeting, and positioning, which is very important. Every time we have to talk about the customers. So when you talk about the customers, you're going to have to say who is the target and what are the characteristics of segments that we use in order to build this target. What was the potential targets? What is the target that we eventually selected? Which one we selected? What method did we use? Did we go for concentrated or differentiated? And why did we select differentiated instead of concentrated? What are the current targeting method that we want to use, but eventually we may want to evolve into something else, and we would recommend to go into, I don't know, concentrated later meaning this date or maybe that milestone because of this and all that. So you have to have this constant understanding of it's like playing games, the steps and what can happen after these steps anticipates the motion and the movement in order to give recommendation to the clients. You are the advisor and you're advising the clients on the scenarios that you think are most likely to happen. I was talking about the different targeting strategies, meaning there are three main ones. The importance of choosing the right strategy depending on the situation of the business, with the most common strategy for small business being differentiated versus larger businesses where in a position with more resources to adopt more of a concentrated targeting strategies. But these are the rule of thumb, not for all of them, but for the majority. And you don't want to think this is a formula that you use systematically, but if you need to understand the reason why. And the reason why is a question of resources. Having a specific product for a specific group of customers, like having all your eggs in one basket. So you need to make sure that this one's going to work. So when you're a small business, having all your eggs in one basket, it's not too much of a big problem because you don't have that many resources. So you may as well concentrate your resources. Trying to use very little resources to cover a lot of people is just unrealistic. The last element of STP is positioning, the P. Well, positioning, unfortunately, is not the easiest thing. In fact, it's one of the hardest function in marketing, because in positioning, you have to really understand what's the essence, the DNA of the brand, and what it should mean for the customer. The decision of identifying the positioning should come after you've defined who are the customers. So it should be ST and then P. However, it is very common, if not most common, for small businesses. It's, I mean, I don't know what's the percentage, but it's going to be so high, like 90, 95% of small businesses, instead of doing STP, they do PST, positioning, segmentation, and targeting. The idea behind this is that they don't really study too much the market. They don't spend enough time understanding who are their customers, and all they're focusing on is what they're going to sell, what service they're going to sell, how much they're going to sell, how much money they need to sell it for, how much inventory do they have, how many customers are coming to us for the product, and they just take care of who comes to them. And so they are coming up with an offer and waiting for the demand. So that's, we are positioning, and let's see who wants it. Unfortunately, that's a very reactive and passive perspective in business, where a more active, proactive, and positive view of business would be to say, who are the people, what do they want, what can we give to them, what makes sense for us to give to them, and then come up with the offer. And then once you give the offer, you give it specifically to someone, so you're much more efficient, and they just like what you're offering to them. So the positioning is this meaning that you offer to the customers, which is a meaning that you've understood that the customer wants, and it's a meaning that you also understand that that's what they would prefer compared to the competitors. And it's also something that you're capable of doing. So you don't come up with a position that is non-sustainable because it does not meet your strengths. It has to be something that you promise of providing, that is really something that you can deliver. Here's a perceptual map. So there's two types of maps that businesses create. There's one is called the positioning map, is where the business perceive themselves. And the perceptual map is where do the customers, the consumers perceive the business. One is a wishing well map by the marketers, which is the definition of where they want to be, versus the perceptual map is more objective, because it talks about what is the consumer, where do they see you. It's objective, but again, it has to be the perception of the target. If it's the perception of someone else than the target, then it doesn't matter. It's not interesting to know what other people think of you when these others are not the one that you're trying to focus on. So here on this map, I have a bunch of brands of cars, and I have different circles. The circles are the sizes of the potential target. And here it says there's 5 targets. 1 is the biggest, and 5 is the smallest. So as a big company, you would rather want to be in between the 1 and 2. So that way you sort of control these 2 large size targets. And 5 would be more for a brand that is more specialized and more niche. And so the positioning map, you could remove the word perceptual and say, you know, Porsche, we want to be perceived as the one brand based on the characteristic of positioning, which is touch of class and spirited driving. We want to be at the top right as a positioning map, our wish of positioning. And then you give it to the target of people that care for spirited cars and also looking for more luxury cars. And then when you give them the brand Porsche, they put you in this corner, which is equal to where you want to be. So then there would be a perfect match between your positioning and the perceived positioning of your consumers. When there is a mismatch, that's when you have to think about the communication activities, maybe the changes of the product and benefits, in order to be more overlapping between your positioning and your perceptual. They both need to be done. The positioning is coming up with the positioning is very, very difficult because you have to think about the attributes of positioning, and you can't have too many attributes. So what's a good positioning? Usually it's having one attribute, one value that is the meaning of your brand. You know, so your brand is reliable, your brand is efficient, your brand is fun. One. Could you have 2, fun and efficient? You could, but the more positioning attributes you have, the more expensive it is to communicate and have a perfect matching map between positioning and perception. So if you had a third one, suddenly it's not 3 times more expensive, but maybe 8 times more expensive. So only very large businesses can afford having more than one positioning. This slide is nothing new. It just summarizes everything I've said for the past 20 minutes, which is that there are multiple steps in achieving segmentation, targeting, and positioning. That segmentation is dividing, targeting is grouping, and positioning is the last step that should come up with the attributes of positioning. So you have characteristics of segmentation that talks about the customers, and attributes of positioning are the benefits. Usually, I mean, it doesn't have to be a benefit, but usually it has to do with the benefit that is meaningful for the customers. Here is another display on how you would present your STP. So S segmentation, you would have all the characteristics, and you could have even more characteristics than this. So there's many more characteristics of segmentation. So many more segments than there are targets and positioning. So you could almost say we have 12 segments, 2 targets, and 1 positioning. That would not be crazy to think about this. 1, 2, 6 or something like that. But you could have 25, 2, and eventually 2 positioning as well. 25 segments, 2 targets, because you can't go after all the targets. Even though you come up with multiple targets, then you have to do what we did earlier, where you talk about concentrated or maybe differentiated. So maybe you have 2 targets, you focus on the 2 targets, or you do differentiated and you have 2 targets, you're going to make 2 different products. So you see, the more products you make, the more resources you have to allocate, the more messages you have to do. So that's why differentiation is good for small businesses, as long as they have 1 or maybe 2. But big businesses are the ones that can go more and more in differentiation. However, they're so big that oftentimes they don't have to be so specific and so differentiated. Or sometimes they go differentiated, concentrated, differentiated, concentrated, and they try to get more and more market share by sort of looming into this. Strategies is the next subject, and that usually come after you define who's the customers. What you're going to do with these customers, you're going to create something new or do more of the same. And that long direction is called the strategy. The low level direction is called the tactics. So when we look at this, it's sort of, I'm thinking of an embedded model where you would have the broad idea and the narrow idea. The broad idea is your strategy, and the narrow idea are your tactics. So now let's look at let's look at the 4 basic strategies. And the 4 basic strategies are market penetration, which means you're going to sell the same product to the same customers. New product development, a new product to the same customers. Market development is the same product, 2 different customers, and diversification is a totally different product, maybe to the same customers or to a totally different customers. Unfortunately, diversification is the 4th quadrant at the bottom right, but it's really much more than a new product and much more than a new market. It's a totally different product. So it's like CSUN starting to build boat engines or something. It would be very different than education, or it would be like I don't know, Panasonic making what could they do? Carpets, you know. So it's very different, very different industry, and for the same or for a very different group of products. But it's much more than the combination of the pink and green. Product development has to be more than just a slight change. So if you're making a Coca-Cola bottle and a liter bottle, and then you're making it into a 2-liter bottle, the 2-liter is essentially just twice the size of the 1 liter. It's not really a new product. You just consider that it's an existing product, slightly modified for the same customers, and therefore it's a market penetration, trying to sell more Coca-Cola. If the fact that you increase the bottle, the purpose of this is not so much to sell more Coca-Cola, but to sell it to a new group that would not buy it at 1 liter, but they would buy it at 2 liter. Suddenly, it's more of a market development where there is a slight modification of the product. So all of these have to be taken with nuances. In fact, could you have a market development and new product development at the same time? You could. So So companies don't have to have one strategy. Could you have those 4 strategies at the same time? You could, but they would probably be for different product or different targets or different markets or something like this. But these are the 4 basic strategies, and it's important to know them because I would say these cover, 85, 90% of the strategic situation. How many strategies exist? There's 100. You don't need to know 100, but if you know those 4, you cover pretty much 80%. But let's look at the next one that are the most common. So there's also the competitive strategy. So it's overall cost leadership, where you try to be the cheapest. Focus is you sell to a specific group of customers. So it's the differentiated targeting strategy. And then you have the differentiation, which means that you sell the product, it's going to eventually end up with a specific group of customers, but the focus is not the customer. The focus is really in the product being very different. So it's not a customer focus, it's more of a product focus, where the differentiation of the product is what you're aiming at in order to maybe get different customers wanting the product. And then the middle of the road is you're not taking a very strong position, is you're just trying to be a product that will please a lot of people. More universal product, not undifferentiated, but just not very specific. Then other competitive strategies are operational excellence, where you try to have the most seamless business, customer intimacy, the best relationship with the customers. They know you, you know them. There's some trust and relationship that you're building here. And then the product leadership is you try to be the category prototype, the brand that is known to be the brand that everybody wants, because you're supposed to be the best higher rated customer product, the one that is the most copied, the one that is representative of the category. So maybe Hoover for vacuum, iPhone for cell phone, Kleenex for paper towels. And the last competitive strategies are market leadership, where you want to have the largest market share. Market challenger is you follow the leader by having strategy which is very similar. Market follower is you follow the challenger, and then the market nicher is you don't follow anyone, you just separate yourself. So market nicher and the focus strategy here in green are the same, essentially. One thing I want to talk about is the BCG matrix, which you may have studied before. It's this idea that if you look at your existing products, services, you may realize that some are the one that you sell the most, and some are the one that you sell not the most, but maybe more and more you're starting to sell. So some may be growing fast in sales, but some may be very large in market share. So low growing sales, high market share is called cash cow product. High market share, high growth is called a star. A low market share, high growth is called a question mark. And then a low growth, low market share is called a dog. So the dog is usually a product that you will disinvest because you're not expecting much to come out of it. You can't really revive it. The question mark is oftentimes product that you started more recently. So it's one of your newest product. And therefore, that's why you came a little late and you didn't catch as much market share. But it's growing fast, and you're hoping to make some good decisions to grow your market share. The star is the one that you were a pioneer, and the one that is on the market is growing nicely. And the cash cow is the one that maybe was a star before a question mark and became a cash cow. So you have a high market share, you've been dominating, but there's not as much demand as the star or the question mark. So you're just waiting to see if it's time to make it become a star, maybe a question mark, or maybe it's going to eventually be phased out through a dog. What is benchmarking? So benchmarking is analyzing your competitors in order to see what are their strengths and weaknesses, see what they're good at, see what strategies they have, see which customers they're focusing on, see what's their positioning, see what's their budget, see where they communicate, guess how much they're spending in their communication and where do they communicate. And then just spy on what they're doing in terms of new products, how many products they're launching and what kind of product, what innovation they're focusing on. So benchmarking is the analysis that you will do for yourself, but this time apply to your competitors. So how many competitors should you review? It depends on your market, and it depends if you have direct and indirect competitors. So, Uber is a indirect competitor with airlines. I mean, the direct competitor of airlines are other airlines, and the direct competitor of Ubers are the taxi and other app type of application for taxi like Lyft. But the indirect one also sometimes need to be taken into consideration. So when looking at competitors, you need to look at both. You can't look at all of them sometimes because there's too many. So you just specifically choose one based on maybe their strategy, based on the location, based on the size or something like this. And you always try to have an eye for the indirect versus indirect. Inside the quiz review, I'm actually putting some deeper explanation of the benchmarking and beside the one that I commented here. But it's important to also, what I didn't say, I didn't talk about the pricing, the distribution, see if they have trade leverages. So which supplier are they using? Sometimes they come up with innovation because they have suppliers that come up with innovation. Maybe they have a distribution or use of logistics that is more efficient, so you want to look at that. And then benchmarking is not just done with your local competitors, but maybe you look at the domestic, international competitors, and maybe sometimes you do an analysis of benchmarking in other industries that have nothing to do with your industry, in other industries, because you may be borrowing some ideas from other industries to implement in your industry. So when you communicate and when you have your strategies and your tactics, you will have different ones depending on the life cycle of your product. We'll talk about the life cycle a little bit later. What's important is that your strategy that you will have at the beginning, which will focus on trying to get maybe some innovators and launch a product which will be new and so forth, it would be different as the product is getting in different phases within the BCG or within the product life cycle. So you have to adjust and adapt. So this slide is a little complicated because it has multiple things looking at the same time, the life cycle and the adoption and the strategies. But the idea is that your strategy is not something that's fixated. However, a strategy, depending on your industry, can last 5 years. If it's a high-tech social media type of AI type of, I mean, AI would be for 2 months versus if you're selling flavored milk, that may be for 5 years. It's different markets require different changes of strategy all the time. Now let's look at this concept of product life cycle. When we talk about a product, we talk about something that is born one time and maybe die another time. So when you're in business as a marketer, you cannot think that producing one product at one time is sufficient. You need to produce several products at the same time. Now, when I say several, it can be 2. It doesn't have to be a dozen, but depending on your resources, you want to produce as many as possible based on your resources, because not everything is going to be successful. So you don't want to be in the position that you say, let's produce as many as possible, let's see what's successful. Is you want to produce and give a fair research and benchmarking and so forth for each product to be almost certain that they're going to succeed. But at the same time, there's not such a thing as 100%. So if you do 3, maybe 1 is going to work. If you do 4, maybe 2 is going to work. If you do 5, maybe 4 is going to work. You just don't know, but you don't want to rely on just one. And when you have one that is successful, that should not be the start of your success. It should be the start of collecting information, collecting resources from the success of this product in order to create future successes with more products being launched. So P1, P2 launch at the same time, 1 works, the resources are used for P4, P3, but no, they don't work, P3 works, P4 works, it's much later. And so you have to have this constant overlap of product being launched in order to grow the company sales. The focus for most businesses is to grow, even non-profits. So you're trying to surf the wave of success by having multiple products go through different product life cycle for different group of customers. So we go back to this, that we looked at it before, because there's sort of a curve between the first people buying it, which is going to be a small group, and the last people buying it, which will also be a small group. In the middle, you'll have a huge group. And that's You don't know if this lasts a year or if it lasts 10 years. It depends on the market, it depends on the level of innovation, it depends on how many competitors you have and so forth. But you want to know that launching products will go through this curve, which follow the curve of the adoption of the customers. So the 4 stages are the introduction of the product, the growth, the maturity, and the decline. So these are the 4 stages. There's some products that go through a constant revival, so they don't go into decline. They go launch, growth, maturity, and then regrowth, maturity, because they are constantly being revived. And revived because of some modification. But the idea behind the modification here is to have a just noticeable difference, which is not too different, because if it's too different, people may not realize that it's as good. It may alienate them to look for something else because it's not, they don't feel comfortable with it anymore, because too much difference is also bad. But you want some differences so that way it brings back some curiosity and some interest. Here, this slide is the one that talks about, again, the life cycle and the different strategy that the different objective and the different strategy that you'll have. So the introduction, the objective is to get awareness and get people to try the product. The growth, the objective is to get some market share, but grow the market. So you're not going to have a huge market share, but you're going to try to maximize it. So you say, because it's at the beginning, you have not too many competitors, your objective is to get 10, 20, 25%. If you got 25, usually after this, you're not going to get more because you have more competitors. So suddenly keeping the 25 is great. So you defend your market share and the maturity, but you maximize the profit because you have more sales. More people are buying. There's the majority of customers. So you can line this curve of the product life cycle with the adopter category. As you're getting into 15 plus 34, the 40%, the 50%, the 60% of customers, this is when your profit starts growing up. And so the profit margin is lower, the number. Maybe introduction phase, you make 60%. In the growth phase, you make 30%. In the maturity phase, you make 15%. So it goes from 60 to 15 from the introduction to the maturity, but the difference is the number of items that you're selling. And then it's becoming reduced. So there you reduce again your profit margin and the number of products that you're selling. And this is when you go into the phase of the BCG matrix, where maybe your product becomes a dog and it's time to divest from it. What is the cycle for creating a new product? So there's 8 cycles. The first one is when you come up with as many ideas as possible. You don't want to limit yourself to the number of ideas. The more ideas, the better. Then you filter these ideas in the one that you're most likely to be able to do, the one that you see the most potential, the one that you can start doing some testing and you see the customers are more interested, and you narrow them down. And then you come up with a strategy to launch this. Then you analyze the business, you know, how much profit margin we're going to have. You sort of make predictions, forecasts, and then you develop the product into a final product. Then you test, maybe you test the market, maybe to be able to make some adjustments. Some products is very hard to make too many adjustments. I mean, if this is the automotive industry, when you develop the product, you can't really change that much, but you may want to work with a consulting firm to collect some data as quickly as possible at the time of the launch in order to make the quickest adjustment as possible. Maybe those adjustments are going to be light, but they're still going to improve some of the satisfaction. And maybe when you do the test marketing, you just sell a limited edition product in small quantities in just a specific area that you can make those changes without alienating the other areas, because you don't want to launch something maybe which is the wrong color. You have new shirts and the design is great, the feel is great, the durability, the design, people love it, but the color is wrong. You have like 6 colors and there's 3 colors that really people don't like. Maybe you have a lime green or something like this, and they just don't like. They thought it was going to be very different, and that's why you did it, but they just don't want it. So you have to make some changes, and at that time you sell those lime green, maybe in some other markets that you're not too interested at a very discount price. Maybe you remove the labels or whatever, and or maybe you just get rid of the product so that way nobody sees this color that sort of has a bad negative impact on the rest of your collection of fashion shirts. And then the last phase is commercialization, where this time you go you grow your market share, you grow the launch in different markets with different customers. Maybe you widen the targets and you widen the early majority to the early adopters to the late majority, and that's what you try to focus in the commercialization, and you try to make this last as long as possible, but this you can't control. So marketing is about the 4 Ps: the product, the price, the place, and the promotion. The what is a product? Is anything that you can sell. It's a generic term that includes the physical products, but also the services, but events, location, people, organization, ideas, and some kind of combination. So the total product mix are the product you're selling, but also the brand, the warranty, the packaging instructions, the after-sale services, and maybe the retail store where you'll be selling the product. There are 3 levels of products that people buy. There's the core, the main benefits. So CSUN core is education. Then you have the actual product, are the other elements that they may be buying. So maybe the majors, the location of the campus, the different professors, the different degrees. And then you have the augmented products. So students in augmented, they may be buying also enjoying the sports activities, maybe the health services, the career placements, maybe the other clubs that they can join, and the networking that they can do. So product of different levels, it's like an onion shape. And so you have to think of the 3 levels and not just think about one, but there's the core one, which is the principal one that they are buying. What are product mix decisions? So the product mix decision is in terms of width. So width is how many variations you can offer, versus the depth is how many variations within the categories that you can offer. So if I say width, at CSUN, let's say we have engineering and business. So the width is 2, engineering and business. What is the depth? So in engineering, you have computer engineer and mechanical engineer and electrical engineer. So the depth is 3 for a width of 2. And then in business, we have finance, economics, accounting, and marketing, and you have 4. So it's 3 depth for engineering and 4 depth for the business school. The length is the total. So the length will be 3 and 4 will be 7. The consistency is the connection between all of these. What are the connection? Again, it has to do with student learning in order to become people that contribute to the environment by building up the economy, by designing things, and eventually looking for someone that was going to sell the things that are designed. So the business school come up with what needs to be designed. They ask the engineer to design it, and then it goes back to the business people to sell it. Or the engineer come up with some innovation, then discuss the innovation with the business people who look for some use of this innovation, and then go back to the engineers to perfect the innovation in order to sell it to a specific group. So there is consistency. That's what's been taught. It's the same, similar subject. So the product mix is important because when you're developing new products, you have to be able to explain the connection between all the products that are being sold. It doesn't have to be always amazing consistency, because your strategy might be diversification, where because of diversification there's no connection. So the formula is not you have to have a connection, but you need to explain if there's a connection, what it is, and if there's not, why there's not one, and more explain so when there's not one, because that means it's going to be harder for the business not to have a connection. So I know that there's one group that is suggesting to the client to do something very different than they've been doing in the past. So in that situation, being able to explain the product mix and how the pieces the client is doing are going to work with each other, and why is this new direction for the business makes sense, and how it's going to work, and maybe how it's going to be complementary. So the complementarity and the consistency between all of these, And maybe the complementarity to also the new things that the client has been working on will be interesting to see in the product mix. So when you think of the product line decision, you think in terms of stretching. And so there's two stretching, there's upward stretching and downward stretching. Upward stretching is when you're making the product more high quality, more premium. And downward stretching is when you simplify the product and you make the product more basic. So let's say you sell a guitar and you have very fancy guitar, and now you decide to mass market those guitars. You're not going to sell your fancy guitar to all the point of distribution for a lower price. So what you do is a downward stretch when you create a lower, simpler guitar that you will sell in more places. Obviously, upward and downward have pros and cons. Going upward improves the profit margin, improves the reputation, improves the perceived quality, and it has a halo effect, sort of an effect over the overall company. Versus when you go downward, you increase your sales, you increase your revenue, you increase your overall profit, possibly, but you also damage the product that were more premium by having less premium. So there's risk in doing this in the long run. But if you can separate the two, and maybe you create a sub brand, or maybe it's a brand that says buy so and so, which is the more premium, maybe it would work. What is brand equity? So brand equity is the combination of the element that form the equity of the brand. A branded product that has no equity is a branded product that probably has no brand. So it's pet food, it's food for pets. But if you have a name, it's called Royal or it's called Petco or something, suddenly it has a brand. Now this brand has the first value, which is called awareness, is do people know the brand? Nobody knows the brand, has no awareness. Some people know the brand, it has some level of awareness. 10% of the people know about the brand, it's 10% awareness. Brand association is not only they know the brand, but they know what it means. So they know the positioning and the value it's meant to be connected with. In that situation, they memorize maybe a word, and that word is what helps you to be differentiated with other brands. And being differentiated is very important. Remembering the brand and having some kind of belief and knowledge and attitudes makes a huge difference. The next belief and attitudes is based on the overall quality. Do they see it as more quality, less quality? And the more they know the brand, know what it means, and have a more clear perception of a higher quality, the more likely they will buy the product. And in that situation, if they are satisfied, they will move into brand loyalty, which is that they will buy again and again, and eventually maybe even advise other people to buy this brand. So the highest level of brand equity is brand loyalty. One of the benefits of brand loyalty is that you can convince the distribution network to carry the brand, because the distribution network is very risk averse. They won't, most of the time, take a new product, new brand. They will rather take a brand that the consumer wants. If the consumer has brand loyalty, even if it's a new product, they'll see less risk in carrying it, because this new product will be supported by the fact that there's people that like the brand and bought this brand before. So having brand loyalty really helps with the distributors. The trade leverage is increased, and therefore you get more confidence from the distribution network. Branding is definitely a strategy. There's multiple branding strategies that I want to discuss, such as flankers. Flankers means that you sell multiple brands where in fact they're all the same, but they all present with a different packaging and maybe a different appeal and promise and positioning, in order to control the market by having you control all the different. So it's like you are differentiated, but you have multiple differentiated brands just in terms of the image and presentation. Cash cow is when your branding strategy is to have a brand that is perceived as the stereotype, a brand that will be least expensive, but still good quality, and people will be comfortable and reassured by this brand. The low entry is you will have the overall cost leadership, where you try to have the cheapest brand as possible, just to make some revenue, just to get some market share. And then the high-end prestige is you will try to improve the brand image, but at the same time, you try to improve the market share, the profit share. So your profit as a low-end entry brand, maybe 10%, versus a high-end prestige brand, maybe 50%. So you sell much less product, but you make a higher markup. And this higher markup, even though it's less quantity of product, makes for a higher profit. And so high-end prestige is a strategy where you focus just on those kind of brands and you develop brands into the high-end prestige in order to gain from the high profit markup that you can get. And eventually, in the long run, the higher profitability allows you to mass communicate. And this mass communication will be sort of democratizing your prestige brand to the sense that people will still think it's prestigious, but more available. And therefore, you increase your profit dramatically. And this is the most profitable company in the world that's developed that. It's called Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, who is owned by the richest man supposedly in the world as well. So they used the branding strategy of high-end prestige for the past 35 years. And that became, this was just a slide in the textbook, and now it's obviously in everybody's mind because after a while it does work. So what are the other five brand strategies? There is the line extension where you sell product always with the same brand. So let's say Danone is your main brand and you keep using it. The brand extension is when you use a new brand for the same product category. So it's Barbie doll, Barbie electronic, Barbie toys, Barbie Barbie clothes, and you just keep using Barbie. Multi-brands is when you use multiple brands for the same product. So you have different brands because you want to appeal to different customers. Maybe there's a group of customers which is buying watches because of precision. So you have Seiko, maybe there's another group that precision is not as important. It's more fashion, and then you create Pulsar, and you just have this one positioning for multiple brands. And then new brands is when you will have a new brand for a new product category, because keeping the same brand is not going to be successful. So we go back to the high-end prestige brands created by Toyota. They tried for many, many years to sell a Toyota Deluxe, and eventually they decided to go for Lexus, which means luxury export US. That was the code name for when they started selling this. And eventually they say, how are we going to call it? And they actually said, oh, why don't we call it the code name, which is LXUS Lexus for the car. That's one of the reasons why they sold this car for many, many years, just in America, before they could sell it anywhere else, because anywhere else they couldn't see Toyota as a luxury brand. And it really took a while for this brand to get to this position of being perceived as luxury. Co-branding is the fifth strategy of branding, is when you have two brand names together in order to increase the value, because there is association meanings for each one of the brand that raises the positioning of the brand. Because each brand has, let's say, one positioning. If you combine those two brands, then you end up with two positioning, and it makes it easier. The next thing I want to talk about is the pricing. So pricing is something that you do in order to survive. You make the lowest price to survive. You make the highest price to increase your profit. You change your prices to be to vary with your competitors. So you try to be slightly more than your competitors to be perceived as higher quality, or slightly less in order to be competitive. Maybe you want to change your price also because you perceive as low quality, so you increase a little bit your price so people perceive it to be higher. The price is made of fixed cost and variable cost. The fixed costs don't change as you produce more products. You have the salaries, and these don't change. You have your rents, and this doesn't change. But the variable costs, they change because you need more material the more products that you make. So the combination of your fixed cost and your variable cost make it the final total cost. They are cost consideration. Economies of scales is the more you produce, the cheaper it's going to be, because eventually with economies of scales is you buy more raw material and you get a reduction of the raw material. So if you selling bottled water and you sell 1,000 bottled water, the bottled water is going to be much more expensive than if you're selling 100,000 bottled water, because the cost of the cap, printing the paper, is going to be reduced the larger the number, because the suppliers will give you a better discount. In addition, when you will bottle these, you will use machines which are more and more expensive, but based on the offset of the number of products being made, it will start costing you less per bottle. So the more you make, normally the cheaper the product becomes, and therefore you can sell it maybe slightly less expensive, but you will still make more money. So you'll make a reduction, but which will be less than the reduction of the savings that you made by increasing the volumes. And that's where your profit eventually become bigger. The experience curve is the more you produce, the better you become at producing, because you're learning to produce better, more efficiently. Your staff becomes better, your processes becomes better. And with the experience curve, in the same amount of time, you produce more product. In the same amount of time, you make less defects and you become better. So as a company selling, your dream is to sell the highest price as possible. And then the worst case situation is selling at the price of the cost. So business has to decide to make a sale between these two, cost and dream price. So what are the four methods that you can use? Cost-based pricing. So you take the cost and you add 10%. So you just think about a percentage of markup that you want to add. Break-even pricing is you decide how much profit you want to make. So break-even is a formula that sits on the internet somewhere, on a break-even pricing Google search, or inside your Excel spreadsheet, where you will put how many products you want to sell, how much is the cost of the product, how much is the price that you want to sell, and how much, when do you want to start making your first $100,000. So then you will see that you have to make variation of quantities in order to get to the $100,000, or you have to make variation of the prices. These you can do on with your computers, but then there's the reality of what the market will accept. So you have to really determine what's the realistic price that my customers will want to buy, and with my resources, what is the realistic number that I can be selling within this period in order to reach the $100,000. What's great about the break-even pricing, it's the one that is the most realistic one, the one that is used the most by the investors, the one that is used the most by Shark Tank people. If you look at the episodes, every episode, pretty much every shark will think or ask the question about the break-even by asking the quantity, the cost, and their return. And that's what they base when they think about what percentage do they want in the business, how much they're putting in the business. But it's not the only reason, because they have also a way to boost businesses when in fact they can be sometimes like seriously multiply the amount of money that this business can generate far beyond what the owner and creator of the business has been thinking because of their network. But break-even pricing is very smart. I strongly recommend that you learn the four that it's five actually, four that I'm explaining here, but with break-even, the one that you want to spend more time by yourself personally to think about. And that's even more true when you're a marketing student, because break-even analysis is the one that the finance students know very well. And they have a big advantage. If they have a good sense of marketing, a finance student will be better than a marketing student, because they will be having this good sense of marketing and understand very well the break-even, which will make them very effective. But if you're excellent in marketing and not so good in finance, but you realize it's important, I would say spend time in one thing and one thing only. Spend time studying break-even analysis. You have to study for this quiz. You have to study it because it's very likely that you're going to have to pitch it somewhere in your presentation, but you want to study it because I'm just telling you, based on my experience, it's one huge weaknesses that marketing students have, and it's something that is used all the time. And again, if you don't believe me, look at Shark Tank, and you would see that it's discussed 100%, 99% of the time, just so that way I'm safe. But value-based pricing, that's the one you probably will understand the best, because that's the, if you're an economic person or a management person, you have to learn it. And it's sort of the very marketing ways. What are the customers think it's worth? The price of a product is based on the demand, is what they're willing to spend, is the price it should be. It's true. But this very marketing-oriented type of pricing has a little problem, is it doesn't take into account the competitors, which is the other way of pricing, which says whatever is the price of your competitors is your price, $1 more, $1 less. So at the end, the best pricing is what? It's the combination of all of this, the very accounting way to think about pricing, which is what does it cost? Let's make sure we make more money than what it costs. Very accounting thinking. The break-even, which is more the finance way, which is how rich do we want to get and how quickly do we want to get rich. The value pricing, which is the very marketing way, which is what do the customer wants to spend, and the competition-based pricing, which is sort of more the economics perspective, which is what is the price in the existing price in the market right now. So now we look at the different strategies, and it's not that complicated because there's really two big ones that you should know as a marketing student, is you have scheming and penetration pricing. So scheming is trying to sell at the highest price as possible. The idea is that you have a phenomenal product, very innovative. You sort of dominate, you're sort of a pioneer, you lead, and therefore you can have this great product at the highest price as possible. It's called scheming. The problem with the scheming is you're going to be so high that you won't sell as much. You're going to be so high that you're going to leave space for competitors to enter and underprice you. However, you have this innovation and you are the first one, and usually you should be able to build some market share and some momentum in order to be recognized as the one that started and the brand that was the brand that started this, and you should get the fruit for it. In theory, but it doesn't always work that way. So you have a risk of having a situation where your market doesn't go very well and someone else takes over because they have a much lower price and they get the benefits of you launching this new idea and product and so forth. So the other way, opposite way of this is market penetration pricing, where you say, well, I'm going to go start even this new product, even this innovation where I'm leading at a much lower price than a scheming price, because then it's going to make it less interesting for competitors to join, because they're going to be joining even lower than me. If you start very high, I mean, you start this product, it's an innovation, and you start at 100, and really you could do 50, your competitors are going to be happy to do 80, and they're going to cut you off and get market share. But if you could do 50 and you start this by doing 60, your competitors are going to have to come between 50 and 60. There's not a lot of space there, and it's just less stimulating to join in. You're going to get more market share, but you always regret not having sold it for higher than $60 because you could have sold it for 100. That was fair, but there was a risk that I just discussed. Then you have some other strategies. So these are the strategies which are not the corporate strategies, but they are the P strategies. So the next one is product line pricing, where you're going to have different quality and of products with different features. With simpler basic product with 1 or 2 features, and then you have the standard with 3, 4, 5 features, and then you have the premium with 12 features. Obviously, the more features and options the product has already embedded in the product, the more it's expensive, and that's your product line pricing. Other strategies is you have optional product pricing, is when in fact you're making money from everything, but the profit margin, the markup, is even better on the accessories. So you're selling a guitar, the guitar, you sell it for $200, and of $200 you make $40, but you're selling the bag for $60, and for $60 you're making $30. $60, $30, $200, $40. The optional product pricing is great because you will be making money from all of these options. The captive product pricing is it's like the cartridge of your printer. It's the toner. So you sell the printer for $100 with a toner, but that's only going to be printing 70 copies. After 70, the person goes to the store and tries to buy a toner, another toner is $50. It's 50% the price of the printer. And on the printer, at $100, you made $12. At a toner, at $50, you make $45. So it's just, that's where the money is. It's actually on the captive product pricing. There's other type of discounts, which is, you know, if you pay cash in different time of the week, different month of the year, if you buy more quantities, if you turn a product in order to get a better price, maybe there's some promotions going on, and maybe some products are just simpler with, you know, more basic, maybe the packaging is made more basic with no frills. Maybe it's a plastic bottle instead of a glass bottle. Maybe you also make different pricing for different customers, you know, different price for the students, different price for the time when they buy, and different price for where they buy. So the airport price is not the same as the price downtown. Promotional pricing is very important, and there's many promotional pricing that you are well aware. The free merchandise, the more warranty, the cash rebate, and so forth. The one that you may not be so aware is the loss leader. What's a loss leader? Is when you sell a product that is cheaper, but the idea is that the business is trying to get attention by selling a product that everybody wants for a much cheaper price. Now let's talk about distribution. And here in distribution, we're talking about the fact that you have intermediaries and that there is a cost in distributing the product. You're a manufacturer, you have a distributor, and it's going to cost money for you to get to the customers. And it's a specialty to be a distributor. So you are somewhat transferring the cost to the intermediaries. There's many different ways of organizing your channel of distribution, from being the manufacturer and going straight to the consumers. It's direct. Or maybe you have a retailer, or maybe you have a wholesaler, or maybe you have the wholesaler and the retailer. And maybe sometimes what you have is you have brokers, people that make connection to the retailer, people that make connections to the wholesaler, and there are people that are specialized. They don't own anything. They just make the connection. So when you distribute, you have different functions. And so these functions are somewhat the same for wholesaler and retailer. The idea is that you're going to collect information, you're going to take care of the promotion, maybe participate in the cost of the promotion. You're going to be a point of contact for the customers. You're going to try to provide the product to the right customers, so you know your store, where to put what, you know, while selling the retailers that should sell the product. Not every product is perfect for every retailers, and not every perfect product is perfect to be in all the places inside the store, the specific store. So this matching is very important. Negotiating is the idea that they will be the one that will give the discounts. They will be the one that's going to give the discount for if the customers buys more or buys less. You're going to be also the one warehousing and keeping inventory and financing and taking risk for this product to go from you, the manufacturer, to the retailer and to the wholesaler or to the customers. The three strategies or sub-strategies of distribution is intensive, which means you sell it everywhere. Selective is you specifically choose some places, not everywhere. And exclusive, where you have very limited amount of distribution because you have contract for areas. People have an agreement with you that they can have this area, and this area will be protected. They have to reach a certain amount of purchase, so they purchase from you, and then they have to sell in this area. So it's like a car dealer will have an exclusive distribution in the area. Selective distribution, maybe there will be less restrictions, so there may be multiple in the same area. And intensive distribution is as long as you're a distributor, you will be allowed to sell this product. Now, a strategy, also a sub-strategy of distribution that is important, is the push and the pull. So push strategy is more of a promotion strategy where you're going to try to make the price so low that the wholesaler, the retailer are going to want to carry the product. Or maybe you're going to keep the price at the normal price, but you're going to give them free product. So the network of distribution is going to like your product because they're getting really good discounts, and therefore they're getting better margin to sell it to the consumers. Usually the smaller brands do that, usually, but also the big brands do this. But the big brands, they usually do push and pull. So what's the pull? The pull is when they advertise to the consumers and they make the consumers want the product. They get so much information, the consumers, they don't realize that they memorize this information, and eventually they don't know what, but they just feel like they want the product. So they seek the product, they go to the network of distribution, they go to Amazon, and they look for the product. In looking for the product, Amazon may offer another product, which Amazon has an incentive for selling, so that's a push. But they may be selling the one that is a pull, that someone has paid a lot for you to hear it and seek it in Amazon. So if you're a big business, you do push and pull. If you're a small business, you're more likely to do push. However, now with the use of social media, which is a more accessible, less expensive than the traditional mass media, you have the possibility to also do pull strategy as a smaller business through the social media and get people eyeballs that they will eventually want to go to Amazon to look for your brand. So what's the best? The best is to do push and pull at the same time. So that way you have the consumer looking for you and you have the distributors happy to carry your product. However, there is a business world domination when it comes to distribution. There's what's called the bargaining power. So the bargaining power is the manufacturer has the advantage of creating the product and the quality of the product. They have their reputation, their brand equity, and they contribute to the profits of the retailer. Like I said, there's brands that give bigger profit and less profit. More profits usually comes, more profit margin comes from smaller brands where the markup is higher. More profit in terms of volume comes from the bigger brand. So that's a trade-off. There is also the fact that you have consumers that care for your brand because of the equity, the brand loyalty, and that's very important. The distributor has some of the same. They have the brand loyalty, and they have the capacity to buy in large volume. I mean, when you sell product to the customers, oftentimes the customers, they buy one product a month, one product a year, even one product a day. When you sell through, I mean, if you sell coffee to Starbucks, Starbucks is going to be your biggest customer. And obviously you have the customer of Starbucks, but these are the customers that you get through. So Starbucks becomes one that maybe is enough to have if you're a coffee producer. So the distributor, Starbucks, has a lot of power because when they negotiate with them, they know how much you're making thanks to them. Their sales volume is their advantage. And again, oftentimes it's their location. So their location as a domain name, .com, influence, reputation, or as a retail store based just on their address. Retailing is what? Retailing is selling directly to the person who will be using the product that you sell, which is different than wholesaling, where wholesaling, you're selling to someone that's going to be reselling the product or reusing this product to produce something else and resell it afterwards. So wholesalers wholesalers sell a few products in large quantities for each one of the products versus retailer sell many different products in small quantities. Their function is very much the same as the one I discussed before, so I'm going to move on. What's very important here is just to throw in there the fact that you have sometimes wholesaler that belongs to the manufacturer and they have their own distribution networks. Even some manufacturers have the wholesaling and the retailing and all together, manufacturing, wholesaling, and retailing. And some have just the retailing, some have just the wholesaling, but you also have the brokers, these agents. So these agents are very important because they really increase the penetration of the product. These were some examples. So now I'm almost finished. It's the last P, the P of promotion. So the P of promotion, the P of place really should be a D, distribution, and the P of promotion should really be a C of communication. So what do you have in the communication mix, the promotional mix? You have public relations. What is public relations? It's creating corporate image. It's managing relationship with investors. It's creating content. It's taking care of the social media. It's creating events. It's going to trade shows. It's creating catalogs, annual reports. So PR is really a job that has been exploding recently. Direct marketing on the PR, another one is to take care of problems when there's an issue, liability issue, complaints. So the people in PR are sort of marketers, but at the same time journalists. It's like 50% journalists, 50% marketing. And direct marketing is when you create an offer that you directly sell to a database of customers. So by the phone, by the mail, by emails, and so forth, by the social media and all that. Personal selling is the sales force. Digital marketing is when you create an app, when you sell on the internet through your website, when you sell through the social media directly as well. So it's sort of connected to direct marketing. Sales promotion is when you make special offers, and it's short-term and it's temporary incentives. Advertising is when you create a form of paid information that communicates to the sellers about the brand, about the product, about what it does. You either inform the customers. That's one of the things. So you're not trying to sell, you just tell them what the product does, how does it work. Persuade by maybe giving them an incentives. Remind, maybe because they bought before and they're not buying anymore, or they're just buying fewer and you want them to be buying more. And then compare. So you compare to the just noticeable difference of your competitors, or the just noticeable difference from the past or from the various products that you have, in order to provide incentives for them to buy more. So what are the 4 advertising objectives? Is inform, just communicate, and I don't want to say educate, but sort of educate. But businesses don't educate, they inform, right? So the government educates, the university educates, schools educate, businesses, they inform. Persuade is you make a sale, you incentive, say right now 50% off, this weekend, last day that we give free shipping. So that's persuade. Compare is you tell, I don't know, this person lies and this person doesn't lie. Politicians say that all the time. This person promised this and they didn't do it, and I promised everything and I did everything. So they compare. Comparative advertising is very big in politics. And then remind is you had people buy Coke and vanilla Coke, and now they just not anymore because they bought it the first time, they thought it was fun, but they're not buying anymore. So you have to remind them about this new flavor and the fact that they should keep drinking it, and it should not be just a try and move on to something else. So this concludes the summary of everything, and this entire slide is available. If you go to Canvas, you click on files, and inside files you have quiz review, and you have all of these available to prepare yourself. So how should you study? You should read these, look at your notes, and be ready for the exam, which is not next week, it's the following week. And the students, if they follow this, if they have good notes, do extremely well, because this, at least 50% should be a repeat of things that you've studied in the past. And with the notes online, all that, there should be no problem for you to be able to get a good grade if you followed closely, and if you're not confused by all these marketing